everyone, my name is Vina, aka Miss WOC Reader, and welcome back to my channel. So bear with me if you hear a little bit of noise. It's the Friday before a holiday weekend and my neighbors are kind of loud, so I'm going to try and talk over them as best as I can. So I've been thinking about this and talking about it with other people for a few months now, so I wanted to finally sit down and do a video about it because I wanted to squeeze in like a live with Izzy, and I just don't know when that's going to happen. Like at this point, that's because I'm really busy right now. But I've really been thinking about how much the trend to illustrated covers is affecting romance. And I've been talking about it with a lot of people. Like, we're seeing a lot of illustrated covers that just aren't that good to begin with, but we're seeing a lot of bias towards reading romance books that don't have illustrated covers, and I've seen people call them ugly and people outright refuse to read them, and they really are missing out on some great stories. And there was actually a post recently by the Bookish Millenial on Instagram. She did a little post after steaming it, and then it was reposted by Reese Ryan, who added like some thoughts of her own, and it really was having a great discussion in both comment sections there, so I will link both posts in the description box below. But some of it also had me thinking a little bit, and it reminded me of what so many authors have been saying in romance for like the past couple of years now, as we continue to trend more and more towards illustrated covers. Like right now I'm even seeing Harlequin, which is usually known for having people on the cover, they're trending towards illustrated covers now too, and they are actually getting rid of some of their lines for these new lines that are all trad paperback, and they're illustrated covers, which we can have a whole discussion on how these trade paperbacks are like a different price point from the more affordable mass market paperbacks. But also there is a discussion about the covers too. Some of them are really beautiful, highly detailed, but then other ones are really cheap and you can tell they didn't spend the same amount of money. And some of these covers, you look at them and the people are faceless and they don't have like distinct facial features on them, and that's something we should be taking notice of when it comes to BIPOC people, because there's already a bias against stories about BIPOC people and people don't want to read about them on page, but then the publishers are kind of using these illustrated covers as a way to make them more palatable, which is something that the Bookish Millennial also brought up in her Instagram post. Like, there are a lot of people who have no problem reading a cartoon cover, but they have a problem seeing real people on the cover, even when real people are done well. Because, like, I get it. I used to not like a lot of covers with real people on them either, like a few years back, because there were a lot that were like really bad Photoshop, or in the case of black books, there were a lot coming out of TradPub that the person on the cover did not match at all. And I'm still seeing some here and there where they do, where the person doesn't match at all. But I've also seen a lot where the cover is like on point. And there's just something special about being able to see a real person on the cover, like with a pretty dress or who looks like you. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, especially people who are so represented on TV and movies. They've seen plenty of themselves on book covers in the past. Like, I know a lot of people said, well, you know, I like the illustrated covers better because they're better for diversity. Well, not necessarily, because I'm also seeing a problem now where the illustrated covers, they're using a lot of the same artists, and the artists are drawing everybody the same regardless of race, and so everybody's features are looking the same depending on the artist. There's not always a differentiation between the types of skin tones, because there's a very palatable like look on how a woman of color should look, especially a black woman. I know Shay and Britt have talked about this when it comes to YA books. They've talked about it a couple times, like during just their Friday reading sprints, that a lot of these covers look alike now. The black girls on the covers look facially alike. they have the same long curly hair, shorter nose. Like, they make them all look more Eurocentric so that they can, or they make them look like a specific image that is acceptable for a black girl. You're not going to see a lot of covers with black girls with short hair on them. And when I was reading through this post on Instagram, one thing that I noticed was one of the authors was talking about how she loved that her cover had real people on it, and the real people on it were getting paid. And that is another thing to think about that I really wasn't thinking about. So when they have to hire models to do these shoots for covers, it not only shows that the publisher is more invested in this book, because they do have to sometimes put out more money than they would for a quick illustration, but it also employs other people of color. So when they have to do a cover with like 2 black people or 2 Indian models, that's money going into their pocket as well. And so it's not just benefiting the author, and that's something really amazing to think about. And a lot of people who say they will never read a book with real people on the cover have no problem reading a mediocre book that has a cheap illustrated cover. Like, I'm talking about, you know, those ones we all see where it's a drawing of the people, the scenery is more detailed than they are, and we're lucky if we get 2 eyes and a mouth. And a lot of those books are still bad. Like, the cover doesn't dictate what's actually in the book, and not all of those covers are super gorgeous anyway. So it's like weird when people say, oh, I'll never pick up that book because it has real people on it, because they're missing out on great stories. And there are a lot of great authors whose work is going unappreciated. For example, one of my favorites, Sunithia Williams, I talk about her often on this channel. A lot of people didn't take notice of her until her most recent book, The Secret to a Southern Wedding, because it had a pretty illustrated cover. But I'm like, she writes amazing books, and her Jackson Falls series is even better than that book, and it has real people on the cover. So I'm hoping, like, when people pick up that, they'll at least pick up the backlist. But then we know a lot of people, they're just not going to pick up these books with the people on the cover. I saw somebody comment that they read all the black romance out there is to reading trad, and it wasn't true. They were just reading the popular illustrated ones, and so they were trying to say there's no good black romance out there, there's no black romance in trad, but they weren't picking up any of the other ones because it didn't have a specific type of cover to it. And I know Izzy was talking a little bit about it, and I did see somebody kind of briefly touch on it in Reese's comments, where there's like, I don't know if it's like purity culture right now, but there's this thing going on where people are really, really, really against shirtless men on covers, to the point where like those images are getting suppressed on Amazon, which is making it harder for authors to get attention. So I know one author commented that was happening to her, so she went with an illustrated cover, which interestingly enough, like, I can't think of not one illustrated cover with a shirtless man on it either. So it's very weird, like, that people are offended by a shirtless man on the cover, and that they refuse to pick those books up. Because I'm like, if you're embarrassed to say you read romance, just say that. Like, you don't have to read these books in public if that's going to embarrass you. And a lot of times we're reading on our Kindle anyway, so who really cares what the cover looks like when you're reading on an e-reader or when you're listening to an audiobook? Because how often are you staring at the cover while doing that? And you know, it's very weird when I see an illustrated cover and it's still wrong. Like, I've read quite a few recently where the person did not look like how they were described on page, and that's the argument for illustrated covers, right? That the person is going to look more accurate to what the author described. But then, like, I've read books where, one, the author barely described them, and then the illustrators seemed to take liberties and just made them look however they wanted them to look. So, like, their hair doesn't look like how it was described. Their skin might be like a little darker or a little lighter than how it was described. Their body shape is wrong, because I've seen people complaining about how a character is supposed to be fat, yet the book cover had them skinny, and I thought illustrated covers were supposed to be the way to prevent that. So if they're the way to prevent that, why are we still seeing that problem? So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section down below. Like I said, I will have those 2 posts linked. They're definitely worth the read, especially the comments section. I know this is something that maybe a lot of people haven't noticed, but it's really something to think about. And if you like this video, make sure and hit that like button. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!